questions. But what is the role of women in your church, and what can women be involved in? Are there any limitations?
Well, we don't have women bishops or stake presidents. We believe that's an edict from the Lord, and who knows? They don't hold the priesthood, I guess, is that line. But otherwise, they are involved really in every other way in running organizations in the ward. So we have every bishop, just about every week, has something called ward council, and that's where the leaders of the youth group and the women's group they all come together, and they all talk about what we should do in the ward, where we see individual and programmatic needs, and everybody has a full voice in that. But you'll see there's no women in the Quorum of the 12. Those are all priesthood holders. There's no prophet that's a woman. And again, why that's the case, I always send people to God. I don't know. It never was that way in the scriptures. It was always priesthood holders were men. So I don't know. We'll wait for the Lord to speak on that.
Okay, this is the last question. It's kind of long, so if you want me to repeat it, I can.
All right.
Is there any form of hierarchy or governing bodies in your universal faith? What does it look like? Do churches run independently from one another, or do they report to someone?
Yeah, our church is very hierarchical. So there is, when you become a bishop, you asked about training, and I didn't even talk about that. When you become a bishop, the reason I smiled is you don't get a whole lot of training. Your whole life is kind of training. So, but you do get some. So if here's a congregation, then over that is a stake presidency meets. In fact, next week I'll be meeting with some new elders quorum presidencies to train them on what they're supposed to do. But there's 2 books called the General Handbook of Instructions, and those really cover just about every scenario, from somebody coming in and say we want to have a cremation as opposed to a burial. So those are kind of the training things. But for the most part, the church runs the way that we believe the way the Lord says to run it through the prophets. So I'm not saying anything negative, but when I was a school principal a while ago, a few years ago. And my boss, the assistant soup, was a Lutheran. And he once said, Phil, because at that time there were 3 Lutheran churches in Palmdale, and 2 were fighting with one about ordaining women. He says, it'll be interesting to see when your church is a little older if you have these problems. And I said, I tried to explain to him, our church won't have those problems, because if I was the stake president and I tried to ordain a woman to be a bishop, I wouldn't be the stake president anymore. I don't make that choice. So all of ours are very connected up through that line. So the stake president is there to make sure that the bishops know what they're doing, and that they understand the parameters and they work within those. And then the stake president, 4 or 5 or 6 stake presidents are gathered together under what's called an Area Authority 70, and he makes sure the same thing. And then the Area Authority 70s are all gathered together under a member of the First Quorum of the 70. First Quorum of the 70 all answer the 12 apostles, and the 12 apostles answer the prophet. So it's a very linear religion.
Okay.
And the doctrine is kept pure that way, so we don't have misunderstandings.
Right. Okay. Do pastors gather with each other to share ideas or your vision or mission on a regular basis? And are there support systems set up to assist pastors in leading the church?
Yeah, I mean, the stake presidency and with the stake presidency, there are 12 other guys called the High Council, and they go around and support the wards in various ways and help the bishops and answer questions and assist them and train them. Bishops get together probably 3 or 4 times a year in a meeting with the stake presidency to talk about stuff, and they talk together, but not in a kind of other than that capacity. We usually have 2 or 3 bishops in a building, because that 2 or 3 congregations share a building, and so they'll talk together about stuff. But pretty much when you're a bishop, it's a linear. You're answered up to the stake president.
Kind of feels like a family, like hearing about it.
It is kind of, well, and we call each other brother and sister when you go to
Right.
church, and we do that because we believe that we're all children of, Hebrews 12, right, says that God's the Father of our spirits, and we believe we're all brothers and sisters on that level. But yeah, the church is kind of like a big family. Sometimes bishops are called the father of the ward, because you go to the bishop for everything from, if there's a problem with sin to if you need counsel on things. Not that you can't go to your own folks or other people in the ward, but he's kind of the focal point so far as the advice giver.
So does everyone know everyone in the ward? Or
Pretty
is it like
much in the
pretty-
ward. Yeah, in the stake, that's a little harder because the
Mhm.
distance.
How many people are typically in a ward? Is it like a zip code kind of thing?
No, in fact, we just reorganized some of our wards because we have so many people moving to Texas and Idaho, and so we had to make our wards bigger because we try to keep 400 or 500 people in a ward. I think that I forget what the maximum is now. Some of the places in Utah where everybody in your street, everybody in your neighborhood is a member of our church. They keep having trouble because they can't build the buildings fast enough so to house all the wards. So those wards get a little bigger, but about 500 is where you'd think about let's maybe split off wards. So we're going the other way here because everybody's moving out of here because it's too expensive. So we made our wards geographically bigger. So we just said you're now in that ward, and they never moved, and so it's all geographical. So once you do that, you go to church every Sunday together, you go to Relief Society together, you go to primary together, you have ward parties together. In fact, part of the hard part in our church is if you shift wards, you guys never moved, but we had to redo the boundaries of the ward, and you're not in her ward anymore, unless you guys really make an effort to get together church-wise, you won't get together more than maybe 3 times a year, because about 3 times a year the whole state comes together for stuff.
Yeah.
But you really, so it's like, it would be like if you guys have 2 lunches?
We
Or
have
something.
2 breaks and a lunch.
Okay. So if you somehow got off schedule where you guys see, maybe you see each other all the time, but now you got a schedule, or you move to a different school, even though you're still friends, you sort of kind of start to live in
Right.
different circles, and that's kind of, so you can be in the same building in our church and not know everybody because you're
Are
not in their
you-
ward.
Not allowed to go to a different ward?
Well, you're assigned. There are some reasons to do that, but pretty much where you live is where you go, and I think there's some reasons for that. Jesus said in the New Testament, or Paul said in the New Testament, that you're no more foreigners or strangers, but fellow citizens.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is, and you have to bear with long-suffering people. Part of it is, we're going to be in this group of people, and we're going to practice what Christ said to preach, and we're going to love each other, even if you're a doofus. I mean, the only people you have to bear with long-suffering are people who bug you.
Yeah.
If you're best friends, you don't bear them. And so it's a way to put in practice Christ's teaching. So members of our church don't, if they want to be actual members of the ward, they just don't decide that I don't like this bishop or this ward, I'm going to go to a different ward. They'd have to get permission from way up the chain to do that. Partly because again, it's about loving people and about, because some bishops are nicer, some bishops are more entertaining. We have members of our congregation speak in church, so the bishop doesn't speak every week.
Mm-hmm.
But some people you just like better, and so we discourage, going to where you like and just working with people.
Sorry, I'm just not, I don't know this religion much, so I wanted to know, what is the difference between Catholicism and this, because some of it sounds really similar.
Yeah, it probably would. Well, here's a couple of things. We believe that that the prophet, that Joseph Smith was called of God and was visited by God and his son and called by them to lead the church. We believe that things like the priesthood was restored. First, the Aaronic priesthood by John the Baptist, literally John the Baptist coming as a resurrected being and restoring the priesthood, and then Peter, James, and John, as I said. We believe that there are covenants and ordinances that you have to take part in that are led by that priesthood, things that happen in the temple, which are really a bunch of promises you make with God. And so we believe that after the Dark Ages, or what we call the Great Apostasy, that God had to restore all of the truth and all of the authority. And see, Catholics, I think, would say that happened through Peter and through succession. So the I almost said the story, that sounds a little bad, but the kind of the pattern's the same, but it all depends on your testimony on which branch that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we believe that the truth was lost from the earth. Catholics don't, I think, right? I mean, you
No,
believe
no,
it kind
no.
of continued on.
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, I shouldn't tell that joke because this is recorded, but to a certain extent, right?
We can cut it now.
To a certain extent, it has to be, it's Catholics or Mormons, because we're the two that say we got authority, because Protestants didn't get permission from the Catholics to break off.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the old, sorry, on my mission, that was a big joke. But that's the difference. So and therein lies the question: who received authority and when.